I'm here with Albert, the general manager of the Florida Mayhem, who have just qualified for the kickoff clash. And not just that, you guys actually locked in top 4. Can go a little bit higher, right?
Can go size 2. Yeah.
What are your initial impressions?
Very happy. I mean, we clinched yesterday, but so but we always wanted to win against Justice. I think it was an important test to see like how strong we are as a team, like how um they didn't really whip out Zarya comps, but we were prepared for that. But it was just like it was a good litmus test heading into Dallas to gauge like our strength. Like, are we beating the teams that we think we should beat? Um and Justice I view as like you got to beat Justice if you want to have a chance at winning um the kickoff clash. So I think it was a good test for us. We passed it. Not as clean as I wanted to. But today was a mess in terms of games. Like, it was very sloppy. Like, we started an hour after our match was slated to start. I think we started at 7 and was scheduled for 6. Um, so yeah, some kinks we needed to iron out live, but very happy that we clinched and we clinched top.
Right. Now, sort of like looking outside the last matches, for instance, the one against Houston comes to mind. You guys had some trouble on push. I remember, for instance, like map 1 against Houston, you won most of the fights, but then ended up not winning the map. This time around, again, you get a huge advantage. I think it was like maybe a 60-meter advantage, and then you somehow still lose that one. I think that's currently sitting in the Overwatch League at that difference, probably at a single-digit % that the opponent comes back. What do you put that down to, that you're currently experiencing some weaknesses on push?
Yeah, I think we're probably like 50% of that, whatever single-digit percent, because it's the same. It was New Queen Street twice, right? Like Houston, we lost on New Queen Street as well, and we capped first, and then same thing happened against Justice. Yeah, I mean, I think we know what teams are gonna pick into us come push. If they get the choice, I'm sure they'll pick New Queen Street. So I think we know what we need to work with. I think silver lining is like macro wise, other than the important, the closing out. I think everything besides closing out the map, we did a really good job of. Make sure we won most of the fights. We set ourselves up in a position to win like both times we lost push. Just need to take care of it in the clutch moments, the important fights. So yeah, I think I don't want to say easy fixes because we haven't shown that we fixed it yet. But when we do fix it, I think we know exactly what we need to fix, and hopefully we can get it polished up before Dallas.
Is the kickoff clash at Dallas, is that a double push week or double push map rotation, or what's the?
I think it's control first. I have to check. I think but I do think it's Koth first, and then loser gets to pick the next.
What do
But
you
I
think?
do think it's Koth.
What do you think about that rule set change, and especially also the aspect that it alternates week by week?
I think generally it feels not as good as playing 2 control. Um, I don't know if that's growing pains because people are still learning the game mode, or the game mode's not as. It doesn't feel as exciting as a control map, like because there's natural tension on the control map. Either there's each point goes 100% cap. There's tension there, and then you can get to point 3, right? And it's like winner take all control. It just feels, at least for the 4th map, it feels better to like close it out, like to clinch it on a control map than a push map. But who knows? Like, maybe they figure out a way to make the game mode more interactive or like more exciting, or play better. Because I do think control had advantages as well. I forgot what the conversion rate of first fight wins to point captures, but that was definitely way above 50%, right? I forget the exact stat. But it didn't feel as bad, right? Whereas I think push maps feel like they can end much earlier than the timer, right? Like, yeah, you have 8 minutes, or 7 minutes, but if they cap, there's 5 minutes. It's just like it feels like you're slowly losing the entire way. Like yeah. So I think if they find a way to fix that, how that feels, or add like a way for people to come back. I don't know how what would that would look like, but some sort of comeback mechanic that doesn't make it feel like as lost in the first few minutes. They really steamrolled the first few fights.
Sure. Now, it feels like you're a team that basically very often reasons, like from first principles, goes like, okay, so we know this is how everyone plays it here, but how can we play it here? How can we bring something new? And what we saw, for instance, was that you guys brought out Roadhog on Gibraltar point A. Is that something that you've abandoned for now? Because today it didn't come out, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the Roadhog incident. I think we definitely made a mistake bringing out Roadhog into Atlanta's comp. I won't give the exact reason why, because I don't know, maybe we might break it out again. But in script, like, it wasn't a spur of the moment decision. I think match time, like, there's crucial things that sometimes get lost, and like, okay, we have protocols. Like, okay, we play comp because XYZ, right? If all these conditions are met, you can play Hog. One of the conditions was actually not met for us to play Hog, and we played Hog anyways, just missed out on that queue. But in scrims, like, we were legitimately running Hog. Like, I think some teams in scrims would troll, like maybe they get tilted and play Hog for a few lives or something like that. But for us, like, it was like something we had practiced and we thought was a good strategy on Gibraltar against, with specific conditions on when we would play it. But yeah, so none of those conditions came out for us to play Hog again. But generally we have a few cheeky comps that could come out that on certain matches.
Right. Another thing that sort of stood out today, and not just today in your games, but generally speaking, feels like the frequency of genuine C9s, but also just like failed stalls has increased with Overwatch 2 dramatically. Is it really just like because the off tank was so good at holding the position for longer and stalling longer, especially D.Va, or is there anything else?
Well, it's one less person that can potentially stall the point. It's also, I think, fights get decided like very quickly, or like the tide of the fight can change much more quickly in Overwatch 2 just because there's one less tank. So there's less damage mitigation. Like, if you get a pick, like, you instantly commit, you could win a fight, right? Down numbers, or or you get picked and then you commit a beat, or you commit like an ultimate. It seems like a lot of fights are turnable if you react quickly enough, and I think there's more emphasis on winning the team fight than I think paying attention to the objective sometimes. So for us, like, when we C9'd on Midtown today against Justice, like, someone was in the back line primaling, and we were just there to support. We're like, okay, let's win the fight. We won the fight, but like, we forgot to check Decay's been pushing the cart the entire time, right? I don't think there's any one person to blame. I think that was just a team. Like, anytime you C9, it's generally a team thing, especially if no one's even close. Like, the whole team was just we were just diving. Like, let's make this last fight. Like, we can really win this fight, right? But yeah, I think in general that's true, but I also think it's because there's more emphasis on winning the team fight. Because you can take fights happen like a lot of different places. Whereas I think in Overwatch 1, it was more like there's certain corners, or there's certain fights where the flowchart was much more clear. Whereas in Overwatch 2, like, there's a fight can break out at any point, especially like push maps, right? And you're focused on winning the fight. I think there's much more emphasis on winning fights, no matter where you're fighting. Just win that fight, and then return to the objective. So sometimes you win the fight, but you return to the objective.
Yeah. It feels like also the meta sort of developed in certain directions over the first stage, and it's like a bunch of teams had success with Doom, and a couple jumped off early, and then others jumped off maybe too late. And it seems like the teams that had committed to Winston and then also had the ability to commit to Zarya, and you guys with someone are in a special position where your main tank player can play both and therefore has the ability to even do that within the map, while others have to switch the main tank and off tank. there are other teams that have hard committed to like playing the one player in that position. Probably the most effective being Houston, because of course Dante is usually a DPS player and is therefore hard locked into Doom. Do you think it's a coincidence that the teams that seem to have hard locked into the Doom Fist, namely like Atlanta and Houston, are currently the ones that seem to be struggling from their relative strength that we assume from them?
I don't think I can't blame them, but definitely like it's rock paper scissors, right? Like I think Winston, Zarya, Doom, and then it just so happened as teams naturally will get better at their comps throughout a stage, and I think Doom teams had an early advantage because it's very explosive, and then as teams learned like, oh, maybe Winston isn't as bad as we thought, or like, oh, maybe we can play Zarya, right? And I think because Zarya early on, I'd say in scrims was pretty meta, like at the when everyone started playing Overwatch 2, or our teams got access, like I think Zarya Reaper was like pretty hard meta. And then it kind of went out of favor, um, came back in favor, now. So I think there's always like you don't really know, like I don't blame if you're having good results on Doom, right? I don't blame them for investing time in Doom, thinking that like, you know, we could be like in an alternate universe, like Doom could be the better comp, right? Just off the bat, it was good in the beginning, and it lasts till the end. Um, so I think they just unfortunately they get to win matches, right? So like they did the best. They came out with the comp that they had the most success with, won matches with it. Unfortunately, it didn't like the power spike was like the first half of the stage, and then people started, okay, let's Winston Zarya seems to be better overall. Um, so I think now they have to adjust and figure things out. But yeah, I don't blame them. I think it's just a rock paper scissors game, and sometimes your comp you have to switch comps to win. It is what. Unfortunately, if you're a DPS player and your tank didn't have many reps on tank because they were playing TPS the whole time, naturally you're just gonna have a harder time learning those comps, learning those, relearning those synergies that you kind of put to the wayside to play your D.
Is scrim selection therefore like harder this year? Because it feels like we're not just like having two archetype styles, or like I feel like there's like 3 or 4 styles legitimately right now. Like there's teams like London that play Rhine, and then there's teams that play Doom, and then there's Dallas brought the Zarya in, but there's also still the Winston stuff going on, and then with the Zarya with Reaper, and on some maps you might want to run an Echo. And I imagine just based on like what each team likes to play, it could be hard preparing for the specific opponent that's coming up, right? Do you try to find opponents that sort of match the style, or is that not at all possible because of how you book scrims in advance?
I think it depends on what team you are. I think maybe if you're like Shock, you can like everyone wants to book with you, right? Or like the top teams, everyone wants to book with you. You get your pick of whoever, then you can like select like, okay, like this top team, this other top team wants to scrim us. Which one's more beneficial for us? Like middle tier teams, the bottom tier teams, like you're just looking to book the block, right? Like if you get a block, you'll book it. You worry about, then you try to get the most out of that block, whoever it is against. So I think most teams don't have the luxury to pick and choose. Like, oh, like are we scrimming down? Like Dallas and Glads both want to book the same block. Like, who do we pick, right? Like I feel like that's a luxury most teams don't have. So I'd say it's rare to consistently have those situations where you get to pick between a bunch of teams for the same. It doesn't really.
It looks like from the outside, like the perception around your team was probably going to be, or conceptually, like, okay, this is a bottom 5 team. We are booking Florida in scrims like their bottom 5 team. Suddenly you come out with those good results. You're definitely not a bottom 5 team. Indeed, you're currently a top 4 team in NA. Have you felt that in the way people interact with you when you're booking scrim blocks?
Yeah, but I think there's also a lag. There's also a lag time because a lot of these blocks are booked 2 weeks out, right? So it's like, okay, they know we're a good team, but you still have to wait 2 weeks because people aren't going to cancel their scrims to scrim, So you got to wait. So there's a little lag time between when you're recognized, like, okay, this is a scrimmable, like top tier teams want to scrim you now. There's also like early on in Overwatch 2, like I think we had the most scrim time going in because Gumba had the workshop mode. So I think early on we were winning scrims. I think some teams were just like, oh, these guys are sweaty because they figured out the meta in workshop and like it transferred well. They're not, the real deal, right? So like I think there was some lag time. But I think now also there's some teams that have a reputation, right? So even if they're not as strong as some other teams, by virtue of like the reputation of like, oh, they've always been decent, right? They'll book with them anyways, even though if you like objectively look at, if you objectively look at the team and not like the names, a team with like less standing, historically is actually better than a team that's like always been considered like decent, right? So yeah, there's some lag and there's some like reputational history that goes with booking scrims. But yeah, definitely feel that it's gotten easier to the quality of our scrims, I would say, has gone up as the stage progressed.
Sure. Now, given that it's a topical issue, I have to ask, have you blocklisted anyone at this point?
No, I don't. Okay, so I think blacklisted is kind of like an overused term. Like, I don't think any team is truly like completely blacklisted. I mean, I think we were definitely from a team that's like been blacklisted before. I'm sure some teams would reach out to us for like warm-ups, right? It's not like we're not 100% blacklisted. It's just like there are a certain set of conditions where they would be willing to scrim us, and usually it's like if there's nothing else available, right? But essentially that's the same thing as saying you're blacklisted because it's like anyone but, like I think God, back when I forget, I think it was Chengdu used to be blacklisted when they first entered the league, like because they were just playing like off the wall comps. Like nobody was playing ball. They were playing ball comps, and everyone's like, we don't want to play Chengdu. Like we don't want to practice. Like we don't want to waste a block just playing against ball, against aiming ball. Like turned out to be a good team, but it's like they would post for like there's a scrim channel, or there used to be. I don't know how. I think booking scrim's more like DM this this year. Or as we progress, like people know each other and they just DM each other directly. But there used to be like a scrim channel, and Chengdu would just post. They were just always available. Like you would just check the day of, they have like 2 blocks available like every day. Like clearly they were blacklisted, right? Like, but no team's gonna say like, I will never scrim you, right? Like no team's gonna truly blacklist them. If they needed the scrim, like they'll scrim, or if they don't have anything better. So yeah, I mean, there's teams that every team does this. Like there's teams you have a power ranking, like whoever books your scrims, like understands like, okay, like we want less blocks against this team. We'll take as many blocks as against, for example, Shock or like Dallas. Like, we'll take as many blocks of those as we can get. And then after that, we prioritize teams based on their strength.
Sure. Is there a team where you think like you learn a lot from? Maybe even like maybe they are being different tiers in for you specifically in the upper echelon, where you're thinking like, okay, whenever we scrim this team, we seem to find out something more than if we were to scrim other teams.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the hard part of like booking scrims or like getting value to scrims is you learn the most out of scrims when you're getting beat up, right? Like you're getting pummeled and you're like, wow, we need to rethink some things, right? And you don't learn as much when you're just doing the pummeling and you're just like, oh, everything's working out, like maybe the strat is terrible, but you're just beating a team that's like, it doesn't matter what strategy you used or what comp you use, like you would beat them anyways. It's hard to gauge, like, it's hard to improve from there when it's like, you're not, maybe you're refining the wrong thing, right? Like maybe your Doom comp was excellent against certain teams, but like it's not as good when there's different personnel, or a stronger, playing against a stronger team. Doom's not as good, right? Those are things you find out in scrims, and like, so that's kind of like the paradox. Like you're always trying to book with teams stronger than you and trying to get beat up, but at the same time, those stronger teams, they're trying to learn something too, and they don't learn as much when they're beating you up. So they're trying to look for teams that are on par or that can take a lot of maps off them, right? So I think ideally, ideally you want to be like 50-50, right? I think that's like the balance. If you're like, you win a block, they win a block. You win, you're going back and forth. Like that's the most ideal. Like you're learning both teams are getting the most out of that scrim. That's like a scrim you want to book consistently. Whereas like maybe there's some teams that, playstyle matchup or they're always beating you, right? And it's like, that doesn't feel good for them. I mean, it feels good. Like it always feels good to win a scrim, but it doesn't feel as good to rebook that scrim knowing that like, oh, we like 7-0'd them last block. Why would we, why would they want to book with us, right?
Is there also such a thing as booking easy blocks in order to get some momentum going or some better atmosphere, giving people a little bit of confidence and whatnot?
That's definitely a thing that's been done before. I don't know. I haven't discussed that with Gumbus. Like, I don't know if we do that, but that's definitely a thing some teams do. Like, maybe you have such a poor form, and you need some, you need to boost your ego. Get the juices flowing again. Like, get the confidence up. So that's definitely happened in the past. Like, Mayhem's had seasons where we've been very bad, right? And like sometimes you do, need maybe a contender scrim is like the thing that, um, makes you believe that you can play, play Overwatch. Because there's definitely times where you go into a match like you've been gotten bodied all week, but you can still manage to win the match, even regardless of your scrimmers. And I think those situations, like, it's helpful to have, maybe a light warm up or something to spark that, like, just letting your team know that like team understands that they can still win the they're still a good team despite like poor scrims.
Do you think there is, in contrast to former years, is there something to be felt in terms of like a lack of quality contenders teams to practice against, not only, because they didn't have alpha access, but, also maybe a lack of academy teams and whatnot. Do you think there is something distinctly lacking this season?
I think it would be nice to be able to scrim more contender teams, but like I don't really follow contenders as much anymore. At least since Overwatch 2 came out, because we're focused on Overwatch 2 and like uh but I believe they don't have access, correct? Like they have to qualify first.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah. So they don't yet have access. I don't think we book I haven't booked any contenders scrim. So I just assume those also no ranked the beta's not on, so like I think there's it's definitely we knew going in this would be a unique year, a transition year from Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2, and it's like a beta year, so it's like not even truly Overwatch 2, it's a beta version, or early access version. So definitely knew there were gonna be growing pains, and there definitely are, right? Like there's less scrim partners available. The pool of players that you can scrim against is also smaller, but yeah, that just means our teams are scrimming each other more. So we make do. Like I don't think we generally scrim 3 blocks a day, and I think we've been able to keep up that pace for. So I wouldn't say like we're losing out on number of per se.
Sure. Now, it felt like, especially because ranked is currently not available. Like we talked to Mac and we talked to Pre, and the situation described is like, as we said, teams that have a main tank that has a main tank pool probably stands to gain from having that main tank learn off tank heroes like Zarya at the moment, so they can switch within the map. Problem being, you're probably not going to run your entire block on Zarya on a player that probably first needs to learn the mechanics and needs to get acquainted to the hero, because you're kind of wasting everyone's time that way, right? So how is someone just naturally gifted at everything that he does there, or did you have the foresight to already tell him, okay, you gotta get that grind on to do everything in order to be able to cover the full range?
So when we did tank trials, we trialed them on their off rolls. So if they're off tank, we trialed them. We had certain blocks where like, okay, you're off rolling. You're like, we only want to see your main tank, because you might have to play that in Overwatch 2, right? If you're off tank, play main tank. If you're main tank, you play off tank. So like we saw someone's Zarya, we saw his Sigma, we saw his like Roadhog. Like we would just force them to run certain cups. His Sigma, like, so we saw what we thought. We saw the potential there. We knew what he could do. Question is, can he actually do that like on a match? Does it transition, right? Definitely got very lucky with someone that like he actually can play those heroes at an OWL level as well. Because trials is different from OWL, right? Like you're not scrimming OWL teams when you're trialing. You're trialing internally. You're trialing against, you don't you still don't know. You have a good gauge, an estimate, but you don't know exactly where they stack up against other, for whatever position. But yeah, we saw early on in trials that like he seems to be a very well-rounded tank player, and we expected to, we hoped we'd be able to count on that when the season, and it really panned out for us. Also, it helped we scrimmed a lot in the offseason. We were in the workshop. I think some teams decided we're just going to wait until Overwatch 2 comes out. For us, because we knew we had so many rookies, unproven players, relatively unknown players in some cases, and it's like we wanted to get as many reps as. So we kind of I think we had a much better sense of how our roster was going to look like who's going to start, and what metas, like what pieces we need. I think we had a pretty solid picture of what that looked like before, the beta.
I think what you mentioned earlier, that a lot of teams thought you guys just had a head start and were just used to 5v5, is definitely something that I heard others say. You seem to have carried that momentum into the league, so there seems to be something fundamentally strong about you. It's unlikely that you just like carry that advantage forward. How big do you think, and how accurate was your workshop mode in preparing you guys for Overwatch 2?
The comps that they're playing, like the Zarya comp, for example, is something we played a lot in workshop mode. Like the Zarya, Reaper, I wouldn't say Soldier wasn't as meta in workshop. That's like the new wrinkle. But for sure, Reaper was. Echo was played. Lucio, obviously, Ana was like a staple. So yeah, I think head start. We definitely had a head start. On in terms of developing team chemistry, team synergy, understanding 5v5, how it flows. And we're also very fortunate that what we thought Overwatch 2 was going to be like and what was in the workshop was fairly similar to what it ended up being in the beta. So very fortunate for that. There's a world where we had to, none of that really translates over into Overwatch 2, and then we have to, start's not really a head start, and we have to reprogram our players. But yeah, I think it helps, and but it's different. Like you see the improvements week to week. Like I think once you're scrimming 3 blocks a day, 2 blocks a day on OWL teams, like the best players in the world, like the improvement is massive. Like you're seeing teams switch from Doomfist to Zarya, from Zarya to Winston, from Winston to Zarya. Different. You got Echo players, you got Soldier, you got Tracer, Soldier Tracer, like Reaper, Soldier Reaper. Like it used to. I think the meta started out as like Soldier Genji, right? And I think now Genji's fallen out of favor again. So like it's rapidly evolving. I think the amount of evolution is an improvement is much faster than what we were able to do in the off season. I think it just makes sense. You're just scrimming higher quality teams. You're seeing different styles. It's much faster paced. So I think the head start. I don't know if it'll last for. I don't know if it carries over for stage 2. But for stage 1, because like I think a lot of teams are already like they're becoming. Some teams are becoming beasts. Some teams are, they're really figuring out like what they want, how they want to play Overwatch 2.
For sure. Now, last year, stage 1. You went to Hawaii, right? Like you had a similarly impressive start. You made it into the Final 4. Also, the next stage, if I recall correctly, your strength of the schedule also is pretty strong. I assume you guys are looking forward to like qualifying for the mid-season. Is there something in you where you say, okay, let's not repeat this mistake of last year?
Yeah, of course. It's in the back of my head. May Melee, like, we have a history of doing well. Like, first tournament, and then, like, I think it's 2 years in a row, right? Like, last year, qualified for May Melee. The year before, we went to the finals of May Melee, and then, we had a decent season the year before that. Just, we weren't able to make a deep run in the playoffs, right? Yeah, I have a pretty good memory. I definitely remember that. But I think this team feels different. I feel different about the team. I think, last year, I would say our scrim results our match results didn't reflect how we were doing in scrims, because our scrim like record or performance was pretty poor, like very poor. But I think we peaked, like we spiked like a week before like Hawaii, where like everything, we were just hitting on all cylinders for for May Melee, and we really played to our peak, and weren't able to get back to that peak. Whereas I think the way we're losing maps, the way we've lost, the way we've won, I think feels more sustainable this year than it did last year. Like I don't think we're winning off of pure pop-ups. I think there's people been alternating. Like Majed's played great for us today, for example. Am's always like super reliable and like pops off. Like he pops off and he's super reliable. So I think hopefully like it feels more smooth rather than like a lot of like peaks and like low lows. You know, I don't think we've hit like super low lows yet. I think we've been steady, and I think that's a good sign. And just if we can keep building on that, I don't think I'm not worried that this would be like a one-off kickoff clash or one-off.
Right. Now, as a last question, you guys could peak as high as second, depending on what the rest of the field does tomorrow. In second place, you'd have a pretty wide choice of opponents you could play. Do you have any idea who you'd like to play?
Not gonna speak for the team, because I don't. You know, my opinion of who's strong is gonna be different than if like coaching staff Gumba Gravy day one, and the players get together. But having them power rank, all the teams tonight, and then so I don't have an answer for you. I don't know who we're gonna choose, but we're gonna have a list. Like, we're gonna be prepared for tomorrow. It's not gonna be some ego pick. It's just gonna be here's all the rankings of the teams. We pick and if this team's picked, we go next. It's gonna be very no surprises. Just very like this is how we rank the teams. We're not gonna mess around who we pick. But if we're fourth, we don't get a pick. We just get whoever's there. But yeah, if we're second, maybe Justice. Who knows? Like maybe I think a rematch is better. Maybe Boston makes it in. Who knows? Like I don't know who's gonna be there. I think didn't one of I plan on power ranking because I think last time in May was it last year where Shock just picked like the strongest team off the bat or
yeah,
one of the years Shock picked like the strongest team possible.
Wasn't it
I forget which
Shanghai?
tournament it was. Was it Shanghai?
Shanghai picking Shock? Wasn't it that? I'm not 100%.
Oh, maybe. That it might have been Shanghai. Sorry, Shock was involved somehow, right? But yeah. So maybe that like just changes everything, and we can pick like the weakest team that we think on paper if we're second. Since Shock is locked at first, so who knows? But we'll have a power ranking. We'll make sure it won't be spur of the moment. It'll be really planned out. If we get a pick.
Theoretically speaking, there are some heavy hitters down there that feel like they should have probably not been there, like Glads, right? Would that be a problem?
Yeah, I'm sure Glads will be the last. Like, unless Shock are like, we want Glads, right? I feel like Shock will play the fourth seed. Whoever's fourth seed, I'm almost fairly certain will have to play Glads. And I think no question, I think they're probably going to be the strongest eighth. I mean, it doesn't matter like where they are. Like if you're not 5 through 8, like you get a pick, right? They're the strongest matchup I think out of 5 to 8.
From your perspective, from what you've seen in scrims, do you think Glads should be one of the top teams in NA then?
They should, but like also now that I'm thinking about like it's also in Dallas and there's 2 Texas teams and Houston dominated Dallas, right? Like on land. So like I don't know. I think now I'm thinking about like maybe Glads isn't the most dangerous. It could be a Texas team, right? Like you're playing a Texas team in Texas. They're gonna have home field advantage, even though it might not like for Houston, like I'm sure they're gonna have a ton of fans, right? So maybe Houston would be more dangerous than Glads. I think that's something we have to think about tonight when we go over, who's available, who might be available for us to pick and rank. Because I think there is something to be said about LAN. Glads have rookies and they have 2 rookies, right? They have Patty, Reiner, unproven, right? Like who knows? Do they step up on LAN, or not? Like, but we know Houston's for sure is good on them. So a lot of things to consider. Because I think LAN is definitely different than playing online.
Do you have an idea who on your team has already played LANs? I think Majed played the Saudi E-League, so that was a LAN event. I'm not sure how big the crowd there was. Of course, Animo has played LAN.
Yeah.
Has Hyderan played LAN?
He's played collegiate, like I think he played at Hugh Fest, but like
Yeah.
I feel like Arlington's going to be a much different environment. But I mean, it's not like he has 0 LAN experience, but just won't be the same, right? Same thing with E-League, right? Like I think E-League's more legit because there's like a lot of production behind it and everything. But we'll see. I think I'm least worried about Majed because the first match he played, he just got off the plane like 24 hours before, and he just played like no nerves, nothing. Goes in, suicide nades, like gets his, like it did. I'm not worried about Majed on LAN. I think I'm really looking forward to Majed on LAN. But there's like I think we'll be fine. I think Hydron has LAN experience. I think I don't know if he has LAN experience, but I'd assume he does because he's Korean and they have a very good system over there, system where they get, they plan a lot. So we'll see.
For sure. Then we wish you the best of luck in the preparation and a good draw in the for the brackets. And thank you for the interview.
Thank you.